Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. This barrier, did Harry create this? James stared at the translucent substance surrounding the stands. Magna Custodia, Daphne answered. This is his strongest defense. It can even block unforgivables to some degree. Then that's Harry over there, Lily exclaimed as she stared at the lone figure in black robes. He's by himself out there. We have to do something. We do have to do something about them first. James gestured towards several individuals in the crowd who had begun to move. He'd been watching closely from the beginning. Two of them were supposed to be auras, but he had never seen them before. There was a good chance they were Death Eaters. The other two were shady ministry personnel whose loyalty had been questioned for years. Now it was clear who they had been serving. Lily followed her husband's gaze to the four men. Right. She pulled out her wand but kept it hidden. Everyone, please remain in your seats and stay calm, one of the suspicious men announced, stepping into the center of the stands while the other three moved to different spots. Yes, there's no need to panic. We'll do our best to remove this charm someone has placed upon us, the second man added. Wait a minute. Why do you want to remove it? Yes. Isn't this protecting us? Some adults in the crowd began questioning their suggestion. Hey, you don't know that. It could be a dangerous spell, one of the men argued. The other pulled out his official badge. And besides, we're both auras. We have more experience with this kind of thing. You're auras? Then why didn't you lift a finger when that skeleton killed a man? One of the students asked. That skeleton? The expression of one of the so-called auras twisted with anger. That's the Dark Lord. Show some respect, you mudblood. Mark! Damn it! The other aura cursed at his companion's lack of sense, before raising his wand to aim at the crowd. Okay, no one moves or we... So much for pretending to be the good guys. James had already fired a disarming charm at the man and quickly followed it with a stunner. Lily sprang into action, targeting the other man with a Petrificus Totalis spell. While the fake auras went down, Daphne kept her eye on the last two. The ministry men hadn't expected to fight and were relying on the Death Eaters disguised as auras to handle any violence. But when they saw their partners being attacked, they knew they had no choice. Lapis Spiker. As soon as one stepped into the open, he was pierced in the chest by a spike made from stone that conjured from Daphne's wand. The other was about to aim his wand at her when someone unexpectedly intervened. Dismember. Ah! The man let out a blood-curdling scream as his arm was ripped from its socket and flung away. Daphne glanced back at the caster. I had it under control, Luna. The blonde girl shrugged. It's been a while since I had the chance to use it. Xenophilius stared at his daughter. Pudding, did you just rip that man's arm off? Is this what they teach now at Hogwarts? One of the adults in the audience asked, his expression a mix of concern and horror. James and Lily worked to calm the rest of the crowd. Everyone, it's going to be okay. As long as you stay inside the barrier, you'll be safe, Lily assured them. Most seemed unconvinced considering what was outside, but it wasn't like they had a better option. Lily tried to go outside, but James stopped her. Where are you going? We need to stay here. James, what are you talking about? I'm going to help my son, Lily said firmly. Lily, Daphne approached her. I understand you're worried for Harry. I am too, to be honest. But you can't help him right now. You'd only get in his way if you went out there. You have seen what he is up against. Can you really do something? He's not planning on facing that army by himself, is he? Please tell me he has a better plan than that, Lily pleaded. You know, Daphne hesitated. I'm sure he has a general idea of what to do. But Harry doesn't really do the whole detailed planning thing. He's more of an improviser. That doesn't sound reassuring, Lily muttered. Daphne smiled. But you can always count on him when it matters. He won't fail. He told me he can defeat the Dark Lord and his army, and I believe it no matter how ridiculous it sounds. Daphne? Lily was taken aback by how much faith the girl had in her son. She's right, James added. Harry assured us he has everything under control. Let him handle it. Trust in our son. It's okay, Luna said softly, drawing their attention. She was staring at the sky with a dreamy expression. "It will be over soon. Harry is calling on Hogwarts magic. That's why he brought them here." "Hogwarts magic?" Daphne asked, puzzled. Harry had been insistent on fighting Voldemort inside the school boundaries, but never explained why. She had assumed it was because of the golems, but he hasn't tried to repair them. She knew that if he wanted, he could fuel more magic from the main Arkstone at the Foundation and make the golems regenerate faster, but he had just been raising wards so far. Luna didn't take her eyes off the sky. "I wish you could see it too. It's beautiful." Harry tapped his staff on the ground for the third time. The first two taps had created protections around the audience members, but this one was different. "What are you doing?" Voldemort demanded, his red eyes narrowing in confusion. Someone had appeared out of nowhere, destroyed his blood wards, and now seemed to be activating another one on Nop. "Are those Hogwarts protections?" Voldemort watched as several layers of powerful spells wove across the sky, enveloping the entire lake area. This protection felt ancient, like the original wards from the castle that were created by the four founders. "Kind of. Part of them come from the original protections, but I've modified them to suit my purpose," Harry replied calmly. It felt strange to be having even a brief conversation with this man. He had expected an immediate attack from Voldemort. For now it appeared like the Dark Lord was more curious than threatened by the new arrival. Something that was going to change very soon. "What are you trying to accomplish with this?" Voldemort pressed, his tone tinged with suspicion. "And how are you able to manipulate the castle wards? Are you Dumbledore's apprentice by any chance?" Harry could admit that he had once been Dumbledore's apprentice, but that was a long time ago. In another life. That is not who he was now. Not anymore. "My name will mean little to you now, but I am Harry Potter." "Potter," Voldemort repeated, his gaze shifting momentarily to the audience stands where he had noticed the Potters earlier. He vaguely remembers Wormtail mentioning something about them having a son, and this was only because his date of birth was close to fit the prophecy that Snape brought him, but in the end it was Neville Longbottom, the only one born at the end of the 7th month. Meanwhile, Harry finished the safeguards, and he allowed a sense of relief to wash over him. The most delicate part was now over, and none of these creatures would ever leave this place. "You should have been more wary of me. Not that it would have changed the outcome, but you allowed me to put the last nail in your coffin. So thanks for that," Harry said, his voice calm but resolute. Voldemort's curiosity gave way to anger at the boy's insolence. "I'll give you this, boy. You're brave. Most would tremble in fear at the sight of me," Voldemort sneered, raising his wand to point at Harry. "But I have something to finish here. Don't worry. Your parents and the rest of your family will soon join you." He presumed Bellatrix had already dealt with any other remaining Potters at their manor. All they had to do was to kill the ones at the stands, and that family will be no more. Voldemort was willing to accept the servitude of others, but not of those who had opposed him directly by joining Dumbledore's useless order. Those will have to die. With a lazy flick of his wand, the Dark Lord sent a deadly curse at Harry. The spark of light glowed with an unsettling purple hue, promising only death. Harry extended his left hand and caught the curse. It was hard to see if one wasn't up close, but he had created several layers of his protective charm to cover his skin, so he wasn't really touching the spell directly. "What?" Voldemort's shock was palpable. He had expected the boy to drop dead instantly, and had already begun turning his attention elsewhere when he saw him stop the curse mid-air. Harry's eyes were cold as he glared at his old enemy. "You already destroyed my family once, but that will never again." The curse shattered in Harry's hand, exploding into a million particles of light. "That's... Who the hell are you?" Voldemort shouted, his composure cracking. He may have thrown it casually, but that curse he just used was nothing to be taken lightly, and no normal defensive charm should have been able to stop it. He could no longer dismiss the wizard before him just because of his youthful looks. This was someone who had shattered his curse as if it were nothing, an act that must have required magic of an extremely advanced caliber, meaning that this person was no apprentice but a mature wizard with a mastery of magic that could come close to competing with him. Before Voldemort could recover, loud cracking noises from behind them broke his focus. The giants had finished destroying Harry's colossal golem. They laughed, seemingly unaware of Harry's presence, or the fact that they were now trapped. Voldemort's remaining army, though reduced by heavy losses, had nearly finished off the other golems as well. "Looks like your minions have defeated my golems," Harry noted, unfazed. The golems were only ever meant to be a distraction. If they had failed to hold off Voldemort until his arrival, Ankara would have been forced to intervene. Harry had no doubt that the ancient vampire lord could have annihilated the entire army single-handedly, but it was fortunate it hadn't come to that, as it would have alerted Voldemort of the danger he was in, and given him the opportunity to escape, something he no longer had. The golems weren't lost either. With a bit more magic from the main Arkstone, they would regenerate in minutes. That can wait, Harry thought. I have other uses for those magic reserves. The golems had served their purpose. They could rest for now. Voldemort, meanwhile, was beginning to piece things together. If this wizard in front of him truly commanded those constructs and wasn't bluffing, it was terrible news. How did I miss this? Voldemort thought bitterly. He had been cautious, delaying his return for years to ensure every aspect of his plan was perfect. Yet here was a wizard whose power rivaled or exceeded his expectations. Harry turned his back on Voldemort, sensing the Dark Lord's inner turmoil. "I'll be right back," he said casually. But Voldemort didn't get to finish his question before Harry disappeared. Harry reappeared at the farthest edge of the shore near the boundary of the wards he had created. Ahead of him, Voldemort's army loomed. Despite their heavy losses, there was still plenty of vampires, trolls, and skeletons among their ranks. These were Voldemort's elite troops. The rest had been sent to Hogsmeade. "I'll start with you." Harry raised his metallic staff and struck the ground with a resounding pang. The gems embedded in its head began to glow and the earth beneath their feet trembled. The ground before Harry moved rapidly, forming a large structure. At first, no one knew what it was, only that it was enormous, almost as large as the white marble colossus the giants had destroyed earlier. The mass of rocks and dirt quickly took shape. It was a cylinder with both ends sealed, one side aimed directly at Voldemort's army. "What in Merlin's name is that large thing he is making now?" James pointed at his son's creation. "It's like a—" "Wait." Lily was about to answer when she noticed something strange. The back end of the cylinder became inflated like a balloon while the rest of the structure started to shrink. The trolls and vampires at the forefront of the army felt an impending sense of doom, while the skeleton soldiers, lacking both self-preservation and fear, stood motionless, awaiting orders. The others, however, tried to distance themselves from whatever was about to unfold. Unfortunately for the trolls, they were too slow to do much about it. Only the vampires were capable of moving out of the way before it was too late. The balloon at the back of the cylinder grew smaller and smaller, producing an eerie noise. The whole process happened extremely swiftly, taking only seconds. Then, all of a sudden, the front part of the cylinder exploded, creating a tremendously loud noise that startled everyone. Something massive shot out of the improvised structure and struck the dense ranks of skeletons and trolls that hadn't escaped in time. Pieces of smashed bones and troll bits were scattered all over the place. "A cannon!" Lily shouted while standing up from her seat. "That's a cannon, and a giant one at that." 4. The projectile, a massive spherical stone, moved with such force and speed that it left nothing but destruction in its wake. With that single shot, Harry decimated nearly a fourth of the army. Unfortunately, that transfiguration only served for one shot, as the structure was also destroyed in the process of shooting the projectile. But Harry wasn't done just yet. He had another way to continue the assault. After the cannonball tore through the army, it entered a black hole Harry had conjured in its path. Another hole appeared near an intact part of the army, and the projectile emerged, cutting through the troops again. Half the army was destroyed the second time around, and the giant boulder passed through it, but even after that the projectile retained enough energy to make several more passes. In a matter of seconds, that single boulder had destroyed most of the Dark Lord's land army, leaving only a few skeletal remains crawling across the battlefield. The trolls stood no chance, being too large and slow to evade the attack. The vampires, however, had survived and were now charging directly at Harry. "How did he do that?" James asked. He understood enough about Muggle weapons and transfiguration to know this was extraordinary. You can't create gunpowder with transfiguration, nor conjure it. A cannon should not work with magic. He didn't need gunpowder, thought, just having some basic understanding of physics. Lily said. He used compressed air. That balloon that appeared at the back of the cannon was filled with air. When he reduced the container's size, the air had nowhere to go, so it found the path of least resistance, and pushed the projectile through the front of it. Daphne explained. I've only learned to make a small version of that. It looks simple at first, but everything must be transfigured perfectly. The front needs to be thinner than the rest to direct the projectile forward, otherwise it could backfire and harm the caster. But if it's too thin, it would break before generating enough pressure and accomplish nothing, Lily added. That must require immense precision. Why is he using something so complicated in such a crucial moment? James wondered. Daphne shrugged. Doesn't he always do that? She wasn't thrilled about Harry's risk-taking, but it was part of who he was. Maybe to him it doesn't seem risky, Lily speculated. Maybe he's just that confident in his skills. Bloody hell! James pointed to where Harry stood. Oh no, Lily muttered. Harry was now surrounded by several dozen vampires. These weren't ordinary vampires either. The ones Sebastian had brought were elite warriors, personally chosen and trained by him. That was an amusing display of magic, but that wizard won't stand a chance against my elite soldiers, Sebastian said confidently. He never was too impressed by the army that Voldemort had put together. Other than the giants, those trolls and skeletons may look like a threat to the common human or wizard, but in Sebastian's eyes they were nothing but useless things. Encora glanced at him but said nothing. If her master ordered her, she would have exterminated everyone present. Instead, her task was to monitor certain individuals and intervene only if absolutely necessary. Harry counted 32 vampires surrounding him. Argentum, Harry channeled a massive amount of magic into his staff. Centum, Hastae. From beneath their feet, the vampires saw 100 silver spears emerge. There were at least 3 spears for each of them. While this might have overwhelmed lesser vampires, these elites were far too swift and skilled. Not a single spear pierced them as they darted out of harm's way. A feral smile appeared on one vampire's face. These little wizard tricks won't work on us. Ugh! His words were cut short as a silver spear pierced his skull from above, killing him instantly. The spear had emerged from a black circle floating above his head. Harry looked at the remaining elite vampires with amusement. What about that trick? Harry moved his staff, and the silver spears were lifted into the air. With a swift motion, he sent them flying as fast as bullets. The vampires knew they couldn't just stand around and wait for the next attack, so they all moved together and charged at him. Dozens of silver spears began to enter the black circles created by Harry and exit close to their intended targets. No matter how quickly the vampires reacted, they couldn't predict where the next attack would come from. By the time they reached Harry, almost half of them had fallen victim to the spears, reduced to dust. Die already! The first vampire to get close enough aimed his cursed dagger at Harry's chest, hoping to end it in one strike. Before the blade could reach him, Harry apparated away, leaving the vampire to stab nothing but air. Where is he? The vampire roared. His companions were as confused as he was. They all saw Harry disappear, but they could not find where he had reappeared. He used that thing wizards employ to teleport themselves elsewhere, another soldier noted. Didn't the Dark Lord say they couldn't do that here? So, he ran away. Someone asked. That could be a possibility. Wait, look. One of the vampires pointed as the silver spears rose into the air again. How is he doing this? He must be hiding somewhere nearby. But where? The vampires looked around, scanning their surroundings with their enhanced senses. However, the lake was surrounded by flat ground, so there should be nowhere for him to hide. In the end, they didn't even have the opportunity to search for Harry as the spears were shot into the sky. They already knew what was coming next, but this time they didn't even have a visible target, so they couldn't stop the spear by killing the caster. Avoid the spears. Their leader Sebastian had no choice but to get involved. He wasn't going to let some wizard kill all his elite soldiers. The vampire lord was much faster than his soldiers and could intercept the dangerous silver weapons before they reached him. But even with his help, the other vampires continued to fall one by one. Just 1 minute after the barrage of attacks began, only 10 vampires remained. Voldemort, for his part, hadn't stayed idle. He rallied his Death Eaters and began searching for Harry. "He's using some sort of invisibility charm. Find him!" Voldemort shouted in rage. His losses had already far exceeded what he deemed acceptable. The skeletons that had been destroyed with ease had been painstakingly revived and modified by him personally, one by one. They were some of his best creations. His skeletal dragon was seriously damaged and he had lost all his trolls. On top of that, with so many elite vampires dead, he had likely lost the favor of Lord Sebastian. If the 2 vampire lords turned against him, he would be in serious trouble. And the worst part was, he didn't even know who this wizard really was or why he was interfering. Damn it all. Voldemort's red eyes scanned the field. Humanum Revelio. His spell revealed nothing, and his followers weren't having any luck either. Meanwhile, the vampires continued to be assaulted by spears made of silver that vanished and reappeared unpredictably. "No!" A vampire screamed as a spear pierced his chest. Only the vampire lord and 2 others remained standing. "Show yourself!" Sebastian had completely lost his calm demeanor. He was absolutely livid now, but no matter how much he searched with his enhanced senses, he couldn't find any trace of the one responsible for killing his most loyal soldiers. He then saw several spears pass by his side and strike the female vampire behind him. "No," Sebastian muttered as he watched her turn to dust. Moments later, the last vampire fell too. Attacked from all sides, he had no chance to escape. "I spent centuries shaping these vampires into my elite squad, the best of the best centuries of work. Gone." Sebastian muttered, his expression twisted with anger. "I will not rest until I rip you apart, wizard," he screamed. The aura of the vampire lord began to change, growing more violent. His eyes gained a red tint and his hair turned pure white. Voldemort was starting to worry. If the vampire lord couldn't find the wizard, he might turn against him. The Dark Lord's red eyes shifted to the other vampire lord. At this point, she might be the only one who could solve the situation if Sebastian lost control, but Lady Ankara remained motionless as if she were waiting for something. The only vampires left were those around the audience stands, but Voldemort couldn't command them. They belonged to her. They would only act on their own whims or if she commanded them. Voldemort felt uneasy as he observed Ankara's vampires. They were supposed to be watching the audience to prevent escapes, but now their backs were turned to the audience, and they seemed to be watching him and his followers instead. Voldemort shook his head. He couldn't deal with another betrayal right now. Lady Ankara had no reason to betray him. She had the most to gain from this battle after all. Let's hope Bellatrix returns soon. And those troops I sent to Hogsmeade should be due by now. Wait. Voldemort tried to sense the connection with his necromantic creations, but couldn't feel anything beyond these wards. That should have been impossible. Hogwarts wards shouldn't be this restrictive. It was then that he heard Harry's voice again. Expecto Patronum. Voldemort saw a bright flash of light originate above him. From the pure white light, 3 magical constructs came into existence and flew away. One was a majestic stag, another was a swift owl, and the last one was a powerful horse. "He is aiming for my Dementors," the Dark Lord screamed while he pointed at the sky with his bony finger. "After him now." The Death Eaters were still unable to see Harry's exact position, so as they flew closer, they began to randomly throw dark curses in the general direction from where the light creatures had emerged. Harry's 3 Petroni were unable to destroy the large mass of Dementors, but that was not their purpose. The 3 of them moved to strategic positions and began to round the dark creatures at the center, like a shepherd dog herding the sheep. All the Dementors let out eerie cries as they scrambled to move away from the pure light constructs, not really realizing they were doing exactly what Harry wanted. His figure reappeared floating in the air right below the mass of Dementors. His 3 Patroni had done a great job at rounding them all up in a single point. Harry's eyes had gained a clear white shite to them. His black robes fluttered around with violence as if they were complaining to him. 3. You don't like this magic, huh? To be honest, me neither. Harry could feel his blood boiling and the brand on his arm had begun to inflict a tremendous amount of pain. He also lost his ability to turn invisible, and he could only conclude that the power coming from Death's Hallows did not get along with sacred magic. I should end this quickly. Harry aimed his staff at the screaming Dementors. There he is! The Death Eaters found him immediately and then wasted no time in throwing a barrage of curses at Harry. A layer of protection was erected around him. That should hold for a bit. Now, his attention returned to his target. The jewels on his staff began to shine with a pure white light as Harry was surrounded by a consecrated aura. Sacro, a sphere of pure holy light manifested at the tip of his staff. The Dementors began to scream loudly, feeling the incoming danger. But between the wards and the three patroni they had nowhere to escape. They were completely trapped. Lux Maxima, a blinding beam of pure sacred light shoots out towards the dark creatures. The Death Eaters below him had no choice but to stop their attacks and cover their eyes. Voldemort, who had been approaching, felt an immensely painful sensation when he got close to the light coming from Harry's staff, and had no choice but to retreat as far as possible. A short moment later the area was involved in an unsettling silence. None could still see anything, but they could no longer hear the sounds of the Dementors screaming. And as the light receded and they were able to regain their sight, their worst fears came true. The creatures that were supposed to be impossible to destroy were no more. No. Voldemort stared at the empty space where all his Dementors had been floating just moments ago. No. Wait. Where did the wizard go? One of the Death Eaters pointed out. The Dementors were not the only thing missing. Harry had also disappeared. Damn it. Find him. He could not have gone too far. Another one shouted. And he was right. Fullerman. The voice of Harry was the next thing they heard. Fullerman. Voldemort saw something akin to a lightning bolt pass near him and strike some of his Death Eaters, killing them instantly. However, this time, Harry had been close enough that Voldemort could pinpoint his location. There you are, Voldemort roared as he stabbed the air with his wand, producing a sickly yellow orb that traveled quickly and splashed onto the ground, burning a large area and dissolving the stone. Depulso, Harry said next. The corrosive yellow substance Voldemort had created was promptly lifted from the ground and sent toward the face of an unfortunate masked individual. The man didn't have time to utter a single word before the yellow thick liquid began to dissolve his mask and then his face. Judge Sin, someone flying nearby, called out when they saw this. If Voldemort had the capability to frown, he would have done so. Harry could have used any spell to kill that man, but he had purposely chosen to use Voldemort's own spell against his follower. That's it. Voldemort's red eyes shone like beacons. Fiend fire, he shouted with rage. A fiery crimson snake flew in Harry's direction, or at least that's what Voldemort hoped, since he was unable to see him at all. Meanwhile, Sebastian and the rest of the Death Eaters had been tirelessly trying to locate Harry. The reason they were completely unable to find him was that Harry wasn't just using the invisibility cloak or his mastery as the Master of Death, but right now he was also the only one in the entire school who could apparate within the wards. Suddenly they all heard someone screaming and turned their attention toward the sound. One of the Death Eaters who had been flying near the lake had fallen to the ground and was clutching his side. Several of his companions approached to see what was wrong. What is that? They saw some purple substance stuck to his arm, and it appeared to be eating away at him. A corrosive curse. Another one recognized it, noting its similarity to one of their lord's favorite curses, though this one acted slower. Can you remove it? Someone asked. Then, they heard their lord screaming at them. Voldemort had realized something they all missed. It was a trap. Get out of there, you fool. Incendium. Viridescent flames emerged from Harry's staff and washed over the Death Eaters who had gathered too closely together. The dark wizards screamed as their bodies burned and melted away. Voldemort looked around himself. Of the over 20 Death Eaters he had brought, only 6 remained. Bloody hell, screw this. One of the remaining Death Eaters pulled out his emergency portkey with shaky hands and tried to activate it in order to escape from this hellish place. But nothing happened. No, no, no. He lifted his wand and tried to apparate, But again, nothing happened. Another Death Eater, Selwyn, who had been a loyal follower of Voldemort since the beginning, decided to address the situation. "My lord," he approached. "Please let us retreat. We've lost the..." Voldemort stopped him. "It's not me, my lord." Selwyn looked confused. He knew Voldemort had activated his blood wards as soon as they arrived to prevent any audience members or students from escaping. The issue with those wards was that they also prevented them from escaping. "I said that it's not me, damn it," Voldemort repeated. "My blood wards were destroyed." He pointed at the sky. It was enveloped in a translucent bubble with a blue hue. "That's his ward preventing you from leaving, not mine." The truth was Voldemort had already tried to activate all his emergency portkeys, but none of them worked. But then, Selwyn watched as his remaining comrades scrambled to escape, using their brooms. Tarkir, Fallman, Divulsa, Glacies. They began to fall from the sky, one by one as they were hit by Harry's magic. "My lord," Selwyn screamed. "You have to do something. You have..." "Confringo." Selwyn's head exploded into a shower of blood. Some of it landed on Voldemort's bone-white skin and robes, but he didn't seem to care at this point. The only ones left were the 7 giants. "Over here," Sebastian punched the ground with tremendous force, sending dust and stones all over. Some of the stones seemed to hit an invisible wall. "Grrr!" Voldemort called the Giant King while pointing in that direction. The massive creature moved very quickly despite his metallic armor and his incredibly heavy weapon. In just a moment he had arrived at the spot where Harry was supposed to be and began to use his cleaver to make wide swings. His 6 giant minions followed his example and began to do the same thing while Sebastian and Voldemort kept track of any suspicious move. As Gruel gave his cleaver another swing, he turned to look at one of his fellow giants and started something on their shoulder. The human. The figure of Harry could be seen standing on the creature's shoulder, looking at the Giant King with a mocking smile. "Kill." Grill lifted his blade and brought it down upon its target, showing no qualms about hurting one of his minions in the process. Harry disappeared from the spot before the cleaver came close to touch him, but the giant he had been standing in had not been so lucky. The king's powerful vertical slash had enough power to cut through flesh and bone, almost reaching the waist of the giant. His poor minions screamed in agony as a shower of blood poured out of the wound as his king retracted his weapon. They all watched as the giant collapsed on the ground, making a loud thud. "You are going to die soon. I will kill you as I did to your son," Harry whispered to the Giant King's ear, while staying invisible. Growl roared with rage and swung his cleaver around. In one of those swings, the cleaver passed through a large black hole and out next to the head of another giant, cutting it cleanly at the shoulder. The 4 remaining giants took a step back and glanced at their king with fear. "What is he doing?" Voldemort questioned. He had not been able to see the black hole, and from his perspective, it looked like the Jatan King had just purposely killed another one of his minions. The king then saw the figure of Harry again. This time he was standing on the ground beneath him. "Ah!" The king stabbed down with full force. Just as the blade was about to touch the figure of Harry, another black hole appeared, diverting the attack somewhere else. "Ugh!" A giant who was trying to get away from the battle found his chest pierced by his king weapon. Gruel's attack may have failed to hit its intended target, but there was someone else watching the battle without missing a detail, and when he saw Harry appear, he also rushed at him. Sebastian punched the figure of Harry with tremendous force, only to find out that the Harry he had just hit was nothing but a transfigured statue made of dirt. Meanwhile, the real Harry continued to provoke the Giant King into striking and then, using his special Hallow ability, divert the powerful attacks onto the remaining giants. In just a few minutes, the mighty Giant King was left alone. All his minions had been taken down by no other than the king himself. The Growl did not care about that right now. In his current berserk state, he was only interested in killing his enemy no matter the cost. But that same state also made him careless. Occludo. A black cloud washed over the giant's face, covering his eyes and preventing him from saying anything but darkness. Human. The giant did seem deterred by just losing one of his senses and continued to swing his weapon, hoping to get a lucky hit. Voldemort would throw a few curses around the giant, but spotted once he realized it was a waste of his magic to continue without a clear line of sight. Hexalvo horribilis. A sickly yellow orb exploded on the giant's face and began to melt his flesh. That curse! Voldemort recognized it immediately as it was one of his favorite dark curses. It was obvious that his enemy was not shying away from using any type of magic, no matter how dark. The giant could not help but let out a blood-curdling scream when the agony became too much to handle. He clawed at his face and large chunks of flesh were peeled off.
Venom.
Taking advantage of the fact that the giant had his mouth open, Harry conjured a green mist that went down his throat and into his nostrils. Just a tiny puff from this mist would be enough to kill 10 men, so it didn't kill the giant immediately, but it did cause him even more pain, and made it almost impossible for him to breathe. Ignis. Harry then used one more piece of magic to end things up. When his fire spell made contact with the venomous cloud, this one got ignited, spreading fire all over the giant's head and torso. The powerful Grill, king of all giants, was now running around the shore of the Black Lake, screaming and running like a madman. After using that fire spell, Harry apparated a good distance away while remaining invisible and just waited. It took almost 2 agonizing minutes for the colossal creature to finally go down after clashing against Harry's shields that protected the audience several times. The audience stared with disgust and a bit of pity at the Death Giant King, while Voldemort and Sebastian did the same. "Looks like you've run out of minions." The voice broke the silence. The Dark Lord heard Harry's voice. He didn't need to double-check to confirm that it was true. His Death Army, which he had proudly brought to Hogwarts to demonstrate his overwhelming might to all of Britain, had been decimated by a single wizard. "Who are you really? What kind of lord have I offended?" Voldemort asked. Despite Harry introducing himself as Harry Potter, Voldemort refused to believe it. Only an ancient wizard with centuries of magical knowledge could accomplish such a feat. That's why he had meticulously studied the area's history and spent valuable resources to learn about Britain's oldest and most powerful magical figures. He was led to believe that the most dangerous individual in these lands was a witch called Lady Yarfell, whom he suspected was related to the legendary Morgana Le Fay. However, she was cursed to remain bound to London and could never leave. That's why he had taken his time to seize the Ministry of Magic, using replaceable puppets to do the work, never exposing himself. The biggest threat at Hogwarts should have been Dumbledore, who was nowhere near as dangerous as a lord, and still Voldemort had ensured he was neutralized before approaching the castle. Yet now he faced an insurmountable obstacle. "I already told you who I am." Harry's form became visible once more and stood before him. His green eyes shone with barely contained power, and his black robes moved in unnatural ways. "Are you ready for the grand finale? I've been preparing for this for longer than you can imagine. By Merlin, what did I just see?" Professor Flitwick stared in disbelief at the shore of the lake where Harry stood facing Voldemort. All around them lay the remains of the once terrifying and seemingly invincible army. "That can't be Harry Potter," McGonagall said, her brows furrowed in confusion. "Of course it's Potter. I told you he wasn't what you thought," Snape responded curtly. "But he cannot be James's son. Someone so young should not be able to wield magic in such a way," McGonagall protested. "Did you not see how he killed that giant? And an adult wizard could do that?" Flitwick shook his head. "Honestly, as much as I admire the headmaster, even he could not come close to what we just witnessed. There is something more to Harry Potter. I believe we are missing a great deal of context here, and we can only speculate." "The headmaster believed he was the only one who could defeat the Dark Lord," Snape remarked. "He did not believe it was possible, no matter how much Dumbledore assured him. But now that he had seen what Harry was truly capable of, the Dark Lord he had feared for half his life did not seem that threatening anymore." McGonagall seemed to realize something, recalling Dumbledore's mentions of a mysterious benefactor who had been aiding them in the war against Voldemort, but whose identity he refused to reveal. If it was Harry Potter, it would make sense. No one would have believed him, she thought. Victor Crumb let out a chuckle. "I knew he was something else, but this is a bit much. I mean, did you see that? How can someone be Cedric trailed off, still trying to process what he had seen. How is that possible? Fleur, meanwhile, was too preoccupied with her little sister to pay attention to anything else. No? Let me go. I need to save her, she cried, struggling against Madame Maxime's grip. Calm down, Fleur, Madame Maxime urged. Your sister is safer down there than up here. We can get her out once this is over. McGonagall approached the panicked girl. Your headmistress is correct. The charm placed on her should keep her alive for at least 3 more hours, and the merfolk will keep her safe. I am more worried about Neville and Lyra, who have completely disappeared. Her mind was not able to process that battle, so she rather focused on doing her job as vice-headmistress, and making sure that everyone in there was safe and sound. Snape overheard the comment about Neville and Lyra but chose to remain silent, despite knowing that Neville was perfectly fine. Watching from the stands, and he was sure that before coming here, Harry had left his sister in a safe place. Right now, revealing the truth about the tournament would only raise more questions he wasn't ready to answer. Back at the audience stands, Luna was shouting with excitement. Did you see that? The giant went bahom and fell down. Yes, Pudding. I did see that, Zeno said nervously, hoping his daughter's fascination with violence didn't translate to future ambitions of becoming an aura or hit wizard. Wow. I can't believe he took them all out by himself, Lily murmured, baffled. Even knowing her son's past, it was hard to comprehend such overwhelming power. Are we going to be okay? I mean, he can win, right? Neville asked. He didn't understand that much of what was going on, but at least it seemed that they were going to be okay. The audience was so focused on the battle that so far no one had begun to question why there were 2 Harry Potter, since Neville was still under the effects of Polyjuice Potion. Voldemort is still there, and those vampires? James glanced at the dozen or so vampires stationed around the stands. Harry had not attacked them and they had not moved from their positions. Let's not declare victory just yet. Don't concern yourself with those, Daphne interjected. Or the one with the umbrella. They're just here to keep an eye on us. Keep an eye on us? What do you mean? James asked. I mean, they're not part of Voldemort's army or that other vampire lord's forces, Daphne replied. James wasn't entirely satisfied with her answer, but now wasn't the time for questions. He hoped for answers from his son once this ordeal was over. At the shore, Harry stood tall in front of Voldemort. You finally show yourself. Voldemort growled, gripping his wand so tightly that the wood began to crack. Now I will A powerful gust of wind interrupted him as someone else appeared next to Harry. Voldemort was not the only one who had lost his army that day. A furious vampire lord, Sebastian, glared at Harry with bloodshot eyes. You finally come down now, die. Sebastian launched a straight punch at Harry's face. The move seemed simple, but it carried an unimaginable amount of energy. Harry had not forgotten about this adversary, and was prepared. His most potent protection spell activated just in time. Forming a shimmering barrier, the punch struck it with such force that a shockwave reverberated through the area, sending Harry flying toward the lake. Harry's shield acted like a protective bubble, bouncing several times on the dark waters like a skipping stone. He stopped himself just before reaching the audience platforms, floating above the water with a levitation charm. That's the power of an ancient vampire lord, Harry muttered, examining the damage. Several runes on his shield had vanished, indicating that a single punch had nearly overwhelmed his defenses. That's no joke. Without the shield, his body would have been pulverized. He had been avoiding this individual so far, but now there was no delaying this any longer. He had to face Sebastian before he could get Voldemort. I'll have to get serious too, Harry murmured as the 9 Arkstone jewels embedded in his robes began to glow with an eerie blue light. Come, Libero! A torrent of magic surged around Harry, pushing the water away with tremendous force as he floated just a few inches above the lake's surface. The oppressive energy was palpable, a heavy weight that seemed to bear down on everyone present, making their bodies feel inexplicably heavier. This sensation that can't be a young wizard lord. I fought one of those before. No, it has to be more. No, it can't be. Sebastian felt shivers on his spine. Desperation crept into his voice as he turned to the only one he thought capable of dealing with this situation. Lady Ankara. The beautiful young-looking woman tilted her umbrella just enough to reveal her face. Seeing this, Sebastian clung to a thread of hope. I need your assistance in dealing with this wizard lord. Please, Lady Ankara. Her response was cold and immediate. No. What? Voldemort's crimson eyes widened in disbelief. He had no illusions about the loyalty of these vampire lords, but given the dire circumstances, he couldn't fathom why she would refuse to assist, especially considering that she was the one who had the most to gain in this particular scenario. Sebastian, however, seemed to understand the motives for her refusal more than Voldemort. His voice was tinged with bitterness as he spoke. I see. I did not mishear you before. You've made a pact with this wizard lord. It was the most logical conclusion he could reach. Ankara offered no reply, lowering her umbrella as if to dismiss the situation entirely. The betrayal stung Sebastian deeply. Though their relationship had never been particularly close, centuries of shared experiences had fostered mutual respect, or so he had believed. Now all that remained was a sharp, cutting bitterness. Turning back to Harry, Sebastian's keen senses could see the sheer density of magic swirling around the young wizard, visible even to the naked eye. He glanced at Voldemort, his fury scaling. You damn skeleton. You lied to us. What are you playing at? Voldemort's wand snapped toward him in warning. This is not the time to turn against each other. Lord Sebastian, we must cooperate, even if it's just this once. Sebastian's narrowed eyes flared with anger, but he couldn't argue on that point. Scanning the lake once more, his sharp eyes could no longer locate Harry's floating figure. When did he mull? Your opponent is me, came a calm voice from behind him. Sebastian spun to see the tip of Harry's staff poised mere inches from his chest. His centuries-honed instincts screamed at him to retreat, and to not allow that staff to touch his skin at all cost. He moved in a blur, disappearing several yards away in an instant. Smart, Harry commented casually. Had Sebastian allowed the staff to touch him, Harry could have transfigured his body into anything he desired. No amount of resistance would have mattered. Seeing Harry so close to his ally, Voldemort launched into action. A barrage of spells flew from his wand, deadly curses chained together with lethal precision. You can have this back, Harry said, raising a hand. A black portal shimmered into existence between him and the spells, and moments later, figures were forcibly ejected from it, intercepting Voldemort's onslaught of magic. Who? Voldemort's voice faltered as recognition dawned. No. The lifeless forms of his own followers lay before him, mangled beyond recognition save for his intimate knowledge of them. Two large bodies were missing their heads, but just by their size and the fact that they were together, he could easily guess that these were Crabble and Goyle. Then there was the form of Wormtail. The rat-like man was looking extremely mangled, with his face partially melted and some of his body seeming to have completely dissolved. Wait, his crimson eyes darted across the bodies. 3 men, but no, someone was missing, the most important person that he had sent with them. Right, you won't find Bellatrix there, Harry said nonchalantly. I reduced her body to dust. Without giving Voldemort a chance to react to his provocation, Harry vanished with a crack. Reappearing next to Sebastian, the vampire lord barely evaded Harry's swift strike, moving with preternatural speed to dodge the thrust of the staff. But Harry did not relent. Every time Sebastian created distance, the metallic tip of Harry's staff would emerge through spatial tiers, striking at him from impossible angles. Sebastian avoided each attack with a skill born of centuries of combat, but his frustration grew with every close call. Enough of this. Sebastian snarled, making a sharp gesture with his hand. 6 black daggers materialized in the air before launching themselves toward Harry. Harry's shield flared to life, absorbing the impact. The weapons dissolved into nothingness as they struck as if they had never existed. Interesting, Harry muttered, studying the aftermath. That looked like conjuration, but... Sebastian growled. So be it. Reluctantly, he raised his hands again. This time dozens of shadowy weapons manifested into existence. There were daggers, swords, axes, and spears. All of them were behind him, floating ominously in the air. Let's test the limits of that shield of yours, he said with a cruel smile. sending the shadow weapons hurtling toward Harry like bullets. The shadow blades hit Harry's defensive charm with such force that it shook the ground with violence. Even if Sebastian had a personal distaste for it, this was still the gift of an ancient vampire lord, one of the most dangerous creatures in existence, and should not be taken lightly. Harry's barrier ended up shattering under the pressure and breaking up into countless particles of light. Voldemort, who was waiting nearby, saw this as an opportunity to get back into the fray with his favorite curse. Avada Kedavra! The Dark Lord manifested the deadly green spark. At the same time, Sebastian had already prepared another assault of shadow weapons. With his defenses down, they could not waste any more time to finish him. Harry didn't attempt to create another barrier. Instead, he allowed his robes to involve him completely. The impossible black fabric wrapped around him, covering him from head to toe. With his entire figure encroached in darkness, the green light from Voldemort's unforgivable curse ended up hitting him right on his chest, and it was quickly followed by the barrage of blades that had been conjured by Sebastian. The two allowed themselves a brief moment of joy. Even if that didn't kill him, they were sure that it had at least caused some serious injuries. Wait, something is wrong. Sebastian frowned when he saw the way those robes were moving. The fluttering of the fabric was too unnatural. It was like no one was inside them. While the two of them were distracted by this, all of a sudden, a flash of light came from above. When they looked up, they saw Harry standing in the air, aiming his staff down at them. A circle of runes was floating before the tip of the staff. The runes seemed to have been made of pure golden light. Luminars, he called. From the circle, a column of pure golden sunlight was forced into existence and traveled from the sky to the ground in an instant. With no time to react, Sebastian's leg had been caught by the beam of pure light. The vampire lord let out a painful grunt as he did his best to move away from whatever magic this was. Vampires as old as he had developed some resistance to sunlight, more than enough to walk on the brightest of days without feeling more than a mild discomfort. But what Harry had brought forth was much more potent than that. It was thousands of times more powerful than the sunlight created by the brightest of days. It was like he was standing in front of the sun itself. Sebastian felt his leg burning and forced his body to take some distance despite the pain he was feeling. Grrg! Voldemort gritted his teeth and covered his face. The light column had not hit him directly, but just standing less than 10 yards away was enough to cause a severe strain on him. His body was not able to feel pain in the same way as a living creature, but he knew when his body was taken damage in the form of a very intense discomfort. Liches weren't particularly weak to sunlight either, but he was sure that if that beam had hit him directly, he would have been reduced to dust. The column of light disappeared after a short moment, allowing them to regain their bearings. Voldemort spotted Sebastian kneeling on the ground and clutching his leg. Harry's spell had caused him severe damage, was not going to be able to use his superior speed for a while. Voldemort was trying to think of a way to defeat this wizard, but it was impossible to do so when he didn't even understand why his previous attack didn't work. It was like he could manipulate space at will, but that sounded ridiculous, even in his mind. But the reality was that nothing he had used so far seemed to have any effect, and the Dark Lord was running out of ideas. His thoughts were interrupted when the sky became illuminated again. Impossible. That was a grand sorcery, I'm sure of that. How many times can he use it? Where is he getting all that magic from? Voldemort, though, he was sure that the previous spell had been something of a sorcery rank, meant to be cast by the cooperation of several wizards or witches due to the large magical demand of that magic. The monster they were fighting against had already used several of them by himself and was still going. Voldemort thought that nothing could surprise him anymore, but when he looked up at the sky he knew they had lost. This time, it wasn't just one golden circle up there, there were many of them covering everything. 100 circles, or perhaps more, had appeared out of nowhere, leaving them nowhere to go. With Sebastian already injured, there was no chance of him avoiding this one, and by the expression on the vampire's face, he knew this. But the Dark Lord was not without hope. A cautious man like himself had been prepared for the worst-case scenario since the beginning. Go ahead, in the end I will achieve my purpose, even if it takes me another 100 years. Voldemort promised to himself. Today he may lose everything he had worked, but it was not over. He will return one day. With this in mind, Voldemort stares at the golden light in the sky and welcomed its fiery embrace. Luminous Maxima, as Harry called out from the sky, and the entire field became bathed in its deadly sunlight. Sebastian had no time for last words and could barely spare a thought for himself. He had been around for so long, and now it was all taken away. Just because he had the misfortune of angering a wizard lord. There was nowhere he could run. The gold light reached him in an instant and began to burn his flesh and bones away. As this was happening, something odd occurred. A distant memory came to him in the last seconds of his existence. An old story told to him by Lady Enkara, a story that took place very close to where they were now, thousands of years ago during her vampire childhood, as one would call it. A story about a terrifying wizard lord who exterminated several vampire clans and their lords with no effort. No one had dared to claim territory in Britain since then. How did I forget about that story? And what was the name of that wizard? Ah, yes, it was Lord Death. With that, Lord Sebastian died at the ripe age of 1754 years old. A short distance away was the Dark Lord, also considering his last moments. Voldemort thought it would be more painful. He could see nothing but a pure golden light. He would have loved to have eyelids again so he could close his eyes, but this was impossible for him, so he had to cover himself with his hands, the best he could. It will be over soon, he thought to himself. The moment the vessel is destroyed, his soul will jump from the phylactery where he had stored it and into the spare body he had prepared. Then he will have to repeat the process of storing his soul again. His spare body wasn't as magnificent as this one, that was for sure, but it was functional, and he will be safe once more. Inside his secret laboratory hidden away in a distant corner of Romania. Its location had been kept secret from even his most loyal followers. And most important, it was far away from here and this monstrous wizard, who he never wanted to see again. The next time, I will have to be even more careful. Better prepared. I will take as long as necessary. Voldemort reminded himself. As he was thinking about the future, he noticed that the light beginning to recede. Wait, I am still here? How could that be? He had been completely covered by that deadly light and he didn't even try to defend himself, hoping for a quick death. When the lights completely vanished, he could confirm that he was still standing in the same place. Everything around him had been burned to a crisp, but the spot where he was, it remained intact. What is this? There was a protective charm evolving him, with rows of runes moving across its translucent surface. He was very familiar with this charm now. It was then that he saw Harry descending slowly to the ground. The young-looking man was still radiating with magic and he stood before him. Why? Voldemort asked. What reason could he have to protect him from his own deadly spell? Finally alone, Harry spoke with a grave voice. His now blue eyes, tinted by the magic from the 9 Arkstone array, were staring directly into Voldemort's. One comment. You thought you were going to get away that easily, Tom? The Dark Lord felt a shiver in his bones. Tom, that was a name Voldemort hadn't heard in a very long time since his days at school. At this point, it felt like all of that had happened in a completely different lifetime. All of a sudden the brief silence was broken by a tremendously loud cracking noise. It sounded like thunder but 1,000 times more intense. Harry moved his eyes upward and there it was, a black and jagged line tearing through the pale blue sky in a very unnatural way that made it clear that it was not something that should exist. It was somewhat similar to the one that appeared during the first task, but upon closer inspection, it was obvious this one was much smaller and weaker. As Harry had theorized, the intensity and importance of the events that take place seemed to affect the intensity of the space tears. From what he remembered of his previous life, not much of significance had occurred during the second task. He did recall a brief argument with the merfolk when he tried to rescue Fleur's little sister, but that was all. He hadn't even been sure if there would be a convergence this time at all. But the appearance of the crack today was evidence of how weak the walls between realities had become. I made the right decision. We probably wouldn't survive a convergence during the third task. That day had been too important. and it had affected the lives of thousands. Harry glanced back at Voldemort, who was clearly confused by everything that was happening today. Harry would never sympathize with this monster, but he could at least understand his position. After all, this version of Voldemort was encountering an obstacle that was not supposed to be in his way. Don't worry, Tom. The show is almost over for all of you. It was becoming difficult for him to speak. His breath was irregular and his muscles were demanding rest. Voldemort had not missed this. He looked into Harry's eyes and noted that the blue hue in them was beginning to fade, returning to their original color. The shiny stones embedded in the 9 pieces of jewelry Harry wore were losing their vigor. He's tired, Voldemort thought. It made sense. He had seen this person casting one grand sorcery after another. Even an entire cabal of witches wouldn't have been able to do so much without succumbing to magical exhaustion. Even if this individual before him was a legendary wizard lord, there must still be a limit to what he could accomplish. But then, Voldemort realized this gave him a chance. He was also tired, but he could still fight if given the opportunity. With renewed determination, Voldemort sprang into action. Making a simple gesture, the Dark Lord began to levitate, and then he lifted his wand towards the sky. Arise, my minions. The corpses of dozens of dead followers scattered along the lake's shore began to twitch and groan. The masked men rose from the ground, moving with sluggish, jerking steps. They have now been turned into zombies. With more preparation, Voldemort could have created something more powerful than simple zombies, but these would have to do. The Dark Lord lamented that the trolls had been reduced to small chunks of flesh. Had their bodies been intact, he could have created formidable creatures from them, but there was no point in regret. He still had an advantage. Ha ha ha, Voldemort's confidence returned. He could still win this. You will regret the day you decided to turn the God of Death into your enemy. The Dark Lord pointed his wand at Harry and unleashed a barrage of deadly curses. Did you say, God of Death? Harry raised an eyebrow. His robes seemed to flutter angrily as they absorbed the curses hurled by Voldemort. The 4th Hallow was unlike the other 3. These robes were more than an artifact created by Death. They were made by tearing a fragment from Death's own robes, containing a sliver of the deity itself. As such, they had a will of their own. This was why they could only be worn by the one chosen by the other 3 Hallows. No one else would be deemed worthy. Don't mind him, Harry muttered to the robes. Voldemort, undeterred, continued his assault. At least the curses weren't being returned to him as Harry had done before. As far as Voldemort was concerned, this was a sign of Harry's weakening state. What Voldemort failed to realize was that Harry had no intention of killing him, at least not in the way Voldemort expected. The Dark Lord noticed his zombies were closing in on their target. All he needed was one small distraction. If even one of his curses landed on Harry, no matter how powerful he was, he would die. Even a wizard lord was still human in the end, and humans could be killed. Get him, Voldemort exclaimed. The zombies groaned as they shambled toward Harry, arms outstretched, desperate to grab him. Voldemort aimed his wand, but held his fire. He couldn't waste any more magic and had to wait for the perfect moment. Come on, get him, he urged, anticipation building. Unfortunately for him, the zombies never got close. Inkara, Harry called out. For the first time since she arrived, the vampire lord moved from her spot, and in a single smooth motion with her umbrella, all the zombies were reduced to minced meat. What? Voldemort stammered back. With a single word from Harry's lips, the tables had turned once more, and he now found himself face to face with the most dangerous vampire in existence. Voldemort could not believe the vampire lord had finally moved, and that she had done so to attack him. Lady Ankara, what is the meaning of this? I thought we had an agreement. She gave the Dark Lord a look of disdain. That agreement is worthless now. Wait, but, Voldemort faltered, unsure of what else he could offer her. She had already been promised this castle. If Hogwarts isn't enough, we can share this country between us. Ankara almost scoffed at the offer. She wanted nothing to do with this country, even if she hadn't already received an order from her new master to leave as soon as the battle was concluded. Disarm him, Harry ordered. Before Voldemort could react, Ankara leaped into the air and appeared before him in an instant. She grabbed his wand arm and squeezed so hard that the bone shattered into smithereens, despite Voldemort's sagely reinforced bones being as tough as steel. "Restrain him," Harry said next. Ankara slammed the lich into the ground and wrapped her arms around him, holding him in place. "Stop this, Lady Ankara," Voldemort protested. "Why are you, He wanted to ask why she was following his orders, but she slammed his head against the ground. "Shall I dispose of him, Master? Or at least permanently silence his disgusting voice?" she asked. "No." Harry used his staff to steady himself, his body trembling. "Just hold him." The light in the jewels adorning his staff flickered. He was running out of magic. "Master?" Ankara's tone shifted slightly, her concern evident. Whether she liked it or not, she was bound to him now, and he did not look well at all. From the stands, Harry's family watched anxiously. "He looks so tired," Lily observed. "Why is that vampire helping him?" James asked. "And why isn't he letting her finish that bastard off? Voldemort is the only one left." "Because that's exactly what he wants," Daphne interjected. "The Dark Lord placed protections on his soul to guarantee his return if this body is destroyed. If Harry doesn't deal with those first, Voldemort will never truly die." Lily glanced at the Dark Lord, recalling a conversation she'd had with Harry during their visit to Spain, where they met the two staff craftsmen. Harry had spoken about the various methods people used to extend their lives. Tying their souls to a place or an object was the most common one. Even if the body was destroyed, the soul could anchor itself to a new vessel. Harry said it was a cursed existence. Lily murmured. "Can he even do it? He looks like he's at his limit already. He's used enough magic to exhaust an entire wizard squad," James remarked. Luna stood up, her gaze fixed on Harry. "He still has plenty of magic available, at least here in Hogwarts." She glanced at the sky. "I'm more worried about that." Daphne felt a strong pull in the air. "It's true there's a lot of magic stored here, but," she hesitated, worried Harry was about to do something reckless again. The issue wasn't just running out of magic. There was a limit to how much a body could endure, and Harry was likely about to push far beyond that limit. "Harry, please be careful," she whispered. Ankara studied Harry closely. He had been silent for almost a minute. "Master, what do I?" Harry interrupted her by tapping the ground with his staff. "Just hold him. I'm ready now." As he spoke, a column of blue light erupted from beneath him, engulfing him in its brightness. "Are those magical particles?" Voldemort asked in shock. The column of light split into strands which began wrapping around Harry's body. The jewels that had been flickering and dimming now shone brighter than ever, overflowing with power. Harry's demeanor transformed. His eyes glowed with an eerie blue light, and the exhaustion that had marked his face was gone. "I'm sorry, Hogwarts. I'm afraid I'll need to take most of it," Harry said quietly. He wasn't sure if the castle was conscious enough to understand him, but he still felt compelled to apologize for what he was about to do. This would be his final spell, and it couldn't fail. He was not about to take any chances. An immense amount of magic funneled into his body, showing no sign of stopping. The ground shook, and the barriers Harry had placed around the audience began to weaken. Inside the castle, chaos unfolded. The moving staircases froze in place. The magical torches dimmed, and the enchanted ceiling of the great hall reverted to a mundane roof. The house elves panicked as their connection to the castle's magic faded. Deep beneath Hogwarts, the massive Arkstone, the source of the castle's power for millennia, spun rapidly. A beam of light shot from the stone's tip, traveling to the surface. The Arkstone, which had powered Hogwarts for centuries, was now pouring its magic into Harry. On the surface, all eyes were on him. "What are you planning to do with so much magic?" Voldemort shouted, his voice tinged with fear. If Harry had only intended to destroy his current body, he could have asked the Vampire Lord to do it, but it was clear Harry had something else in mind. Ankara gazed at her master. He was channeling so much power that his eyes and hair had turned pure white. He was radiating with such a tremendous amount of magic that he no longer looked human. "Lord Death, it's really you," Ankara whispered in awe at the incredible sight. Harry held his metallic staff in front of him, gave it a twist, and watched as it began to spin on its own. When he let go, the staff continued to hover, rotating steadily in mid-air. Harry then began to channel his magic through the staff, constructing the most complex spell he had ever attempted. It was also the only one he had created entirely by himself, with no help from his friends, since they all had already died by then. "You know, Tom," Harry said, addressing the Dark Lord. Despite Voldemort's skeletal appearance and unnatural eyes, Harry could still see the fear within them. "I created this spell just for you. It took me, well, I don't even remember how long, and I can assure you that it wasn't easy. At the time I didn't know about the Horcruxes, or how many you'd made." "You! How do you?" Voldemort's voice wavered. He had believed it impossible for anyone to uncover his Horcruxes. The only reason he had abandoned the Horcrux method was that splitting his soul had weakened his magic. Moreover, he had grown uneasy knowing that fragments of his soul were hidden in places he couldn't entirely control. That was why he eventually recalled all the pieces and used a different, more secure method to achieve immortality. He had sacrificed his body for this, but at the time it had seemed worth it, or so he had thought. "Yes, I eventually learned about the Horcruxes. Unfortunately, it was too late by then," Harry said. "Back in those days, the only thing I knew for certain was this: if I destroyed your soul entirely, you would die, no matter what method you had used to cheat death. That was the focus for this piece of magic. Destroying my soul." Voldemort wanted to laugh. It was impossible to destroy a soul completely. At most, it could be fragmented or damaged, but never erased. Yet the immense amount of magic coursing through Harry gave him pause. "No, my soul is safe," Voldemort reassured himself. "It's securely hidden in my laboratory. This body is just an empty shell. As soon as it's destroyed, I'll be free." He had to keep that belief alive. Harry seemed to read his thoughts. "I know what you're thinking, Tom. How am I going to destroy something I can't even find?" The staff was spinning faster now, radiating an intense aura as Harry poured more of his magic into it. While speaking, he was also constructing a complex piece of magic at the same time. Voldemort remained silent, unwilling to give Harry any information that might aid him. Harry didn't care about this, and continued. "That was my first dilemma, creating a method to track down souls." The air grew heavier as Harry's aura shifted. He pointed his staff at Voldemort, who was restrained by Ankara's magic. "Tom, marvel a riddle," Harry called out. A beam of light shot from the staff, striking Voldemort square in the chest. Voldemort flinched, expecting the end. But nothing seemed to happen at first. "You failed?" Voldemort's voice was tinged with disbelief. He felt no different. His soul was still intact, and his connections to it remained unbroken. He wished he could smirk right now, but as he was prepared to gloat, he noticed Harry staring at something in the sky. Curious, Voldemort followed Harry's gaze. His blood ran cold. The spell had definitely done something to him. Countless strands of light extended from his body. One strand stretched toward the horizon, while the rest ascended into a crack in the sky. At first, Voldemort didn't understand, but Harry's earlier words echoed in his mind. A method tracked down souls. His eyes snapped back to the strand disappearing into the horizon. He didn't need a map to know where it led. It pointed directly to the place where his soul was stored. He had always felt its presence, always known its exact location, and that was exactly where that strand of light was going. "This can't be. He can track down my soul." In his many years of study, he had never heard of a method like that. Had he done so, he would have worked on something to prevent it from happening. But now it was too late. "You see it now, Tom?" Harry's glowing eyes locked onto his enemy. "Those lines connect to your soul. I'm now going to erase you from existence," he declared. Voldemort's gaze darted upward again, confusion and terror mingling on his face. He opened his mouth to ask about the other strands. He had not fragmented his soul this time. It should have remained whole. So what were those other ones? There were so many of them. Harry anticipated the question. "In case you're wondering, those lines represent other versions of you. Many versions of you. Thanks to this spell and the connection to the current you, I've successfully linked to all of them." You want to... Voldemort found these words hard to process. This wizard just told him that there were other versions of him and that he was going to kill them all. It was too much to process in such a short amount of time, that Harry was not going to give him any more. Voldemort did understand one thing clearly at least. He stared at Harry in disbelief. You went to such lengths, just to end my existence. What did I do to earn such hatred? Creating a spell like this just to kill him and making all these preparations to end his existence. He had many enemies in the past, but none like this. Harry's gaze didn't waver. The torrent of magic flowing into his staff had ceased. The spell was complete. You took everything from me, Tom. So I'll do the same, but since you don't care about anyone but yourself, I'll take them all. Every version of Tom Riddle that exists, I will erase you from every reality. Comment. Voldemort had never been more afraid. His voice trembled as he stammered, Wilt, just tell me what you want. I'll do anything I irk. Shut up. Inkara silenced him, forcing his jaws closed. Harry put everything he had accumulated into his next and last spell. His voice sounded resolute. Exitium animi. Harry's entire body was encased in a vibrant blue light that pulsed from him to the focus of his magic. The goblin-forged steel staff before him spun so fast that it became a silver blur enveloped in the glow. As Harry completed his spell, a beam of blue light shot out, striking Voldemort squarely in the chest, as the Dark Lord struggled fruitlessly to break free. The light engulfed Voldemort's body, imbuing it with the same radiant brilliance. From him the glow passed along the strands of light connected to his form. One strand stretched into the distance, while others ascended into the breach in the sky, seeking their targets across countless universes and timelines. In a secluded corner of Romania deep underground, lay a hidden laboratory filled with Voldemort's most guarded secrets. Not even Bellatrix Lestrange, his most loyal follower, was aware of its existence or location. Beneath this fortress of secrecy, secured behind 9 powerful seals, rested the Dark Lord's most precious possession, a phylactery. Encased in a metal shell and further protected by a crystal enclosure, the phylactery housed a green, glowing substance. Voldemort's soul, the anchor of his immortality. Now a string of pure magic was tethered to it. The string glowed with a menacing blue hue, signaling the impending destruction of the soul trapped within. The soul quivered, aware of its doom, but powerless to act. The phylactery was a prison, and a new connection could only form after the previous one was broken. The magical string grew brighter and brighter. The light burned through the soul as it let out a silent scream, trapped within its confines until it was utterly extinguished. Across the infinite expanse of existence, countless versions of Tom Marvo Riddle crumbled and died as their soul strings were severed. In every timeline, in every universe, Voldemort was being erased. The process was complex and arduous, yet to the observers it happened in an instant. All they saw was Harry summoning his magic, followed by a flash of light that spread out in a shockwave, pushing everything back. In Ankara's grasp, Voldemort's soulless body disintegrated into dust, leaving behind only his wand and robes as remnants of his existence. Harry's metallic staff exploded into dozens of fragments, its crystals shattering into countless shards. Despite its masterful craftsmanship, even this artifact could not withstand the immense surge of magic Harry had channeled through it. But the staff had not borne the strain alone. It had first passed through Harry himself. Harry's body, unique in its ability to channel vast amounts of magic, had always set him apart. This quality, enhanced by his role as the Master of Death, allowed him to wield the 9 Arkstones array, a power that would have obliterated most wizards on the spot. Yet, this time even he had pushed himself too far. As the spell completed, Harry's knees buckled and he collapsed. He had not only drained Hogwarts' magical reserves, but also his own. The strain left its mark. His eyes had lost all pigment, turning a ghostly pale, with barely visible pupils. His hair was now a pristine white, surpassing even Dumbledore's in its brilliance. "Master!" Ankara, recovering from the shockwave, rushed forward to catch him. "Harry!" Lily and James cried out in unison, their voices filled with anguish as they saw their son's condition. Even Luna, typically calm and composed, looked stricken. I cannot see his magic at all. Her voice sounded panicked. From the stands, Daphne leaped forward, her wand drawn, and sprinted toward them. The protective charms around the arena had faded, and their power drained along with the castle's reserves. Pointing her wand at Ankara, who held Harry in her arms, Daphne shouted, "Get your hands off him." The vampire lord glanced at the girl with her amber eyes, a faint smile curling her lips. She didn't see Daphne as a threat. "Calm down, girl. You know I'm incapable of harming him." Daphne's frustration boiled over. "Just give him to me." Ankara's gaze hardened, her tone shifting to a sharper edge. "I don't take orders from you." Despite the fear that gripped her, Daphne stood firm, clenching her teeth. After a tense moment, Ankara's smile returned, and the oppressive aura dissipated. "I see why he chose you. Here, take him." She handed Harry's limp body to Daphne, who cradled him as if afraid he might break. Looking down at his pale face, Daphne's voice trembled. "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question. "He is alive, but barely." Ankara glanced at the jewels. There was a strand of magic that remained inside those things. She shrugged. "But don't ask me about it. I don't know much about your wizard toys." "Harry! My boy!" James and Lily arrived at Daphne's side. "I should take my leave now," Ankara said, turning to gather her kin. "I have one final order to fulfill." Before disappearing, she glanced back. "Take care of him. Even from afar, he will always be my master." And with that, the vampires vanished into the night. "Harry, please, open your eyes," Lily begged, tears streaming down her face. "Is he?" James asked, his voice quaking with fear. "He's still alive," Daphne reassured them, though her own voice was shaky. "We need to get him to a healer. Keep him there." The group turned to see Madame Pomfrey rushing toward them, followed closely by Professor McGonagall and other Hogwarts staff. Daphne looked back at Harry's unconscious face, her heart heavy. "You're going to be fine. I promise." 1 week later, Hogwarts halls. "Ah, be careful, you duffer!" Filch screamed, clinging desperately to a rope dangling from the 3rd floor. On the other end of the rope was none other than Hagrid, his massive hands gripping it tightly. "Just hold still, you're going to fall if you keep wiggling like that." The giant tried to stabilize the rope, but Filch's panicked flailing only made it swing more wildly. Much like a pendulum, a crowd of students gathered below, some pointing and laughing at the spectacle, while others watched in horror. "There's no way I'm using a rope to get to class," Paverti huffed, crossing her arms in defiance at the mere thought of doing that. Lavender glanced at the stationary staircases. The moving staircases, along with much of Hogwarts magic, had ceased functioning since the battle by the Black Lake a week ago, making it very difficult to move around the castle. "Maybe we shouldn't have come back so soon," Lavender said, gesturing toward the precarious scene. "I mean, we can't even get to class properly." This rope and pulley contraption Hagrid had devised wasn't looking very promising. "No way!" Hermione exclaimed, her face set with determination. "We've already lost an entire week of classes. The tournament disrupted enough of the term. I refuse to fall further behind. I'll climb that rope 100 times if I have to. Let me help secure it." She made an attempt to lower herself off the edge. "Are you mad?" Parvati and Lavender held Hermione back, preventing her from joining Hagrid. Several sets of footsteps approached. "Yikes. What are they doing?" Ginny frowned, taking in the scene. "A rope to get to class." "Really?" Lyra raised an eyebrow. "The castle's magic should recover eventually," Luna chimed in, her dreamy tone calm as ever. "But how long will that take?" Astoria asked, glancing nervously at the swaying rope. Daphne stepped closer to the edge, her sharp eyes scanning the chaos. "Harry said it would take at least a month before the castle returns to normal." "A month?" Hermione exclaimed, overhearing Daphne's comment. "We need to find another way to get to class. I'm willing to ride a flying broom if that is what it takes." Daphne knelt and tapped her wand against the stone floor. "There's always another way." The ground shuddered, and suddenly tall stone columns rose from each floor, before collapsing forward to bridge the gaps between levels. They flattened and transformed into sturdy ramps. Daphne continued her transfiguration, sculpting the ramps into proper staircases with firm handrails on each side. Blimey, are you seeing this? Ron gawked at the newly formed stairs. Yeah, now we can get to class, Seamus muttered, clearly less enthused. Oh, Ron's face fell as the realization sank in. Right, no more free days, huh? We just had an entire week off. Come on, Neville pointed out, wondering why his friends even bothered coming back to school. That was amazing, Ginny cheered. Yeah, Lyra added, giving Daphne a nod. Your transfiguration has improved a lot. Very impressive indeed. The familiar voice of the headmaster interrupted their conversation, accompanied by the gentle tap of his left hand against his tunic. Apologies, Dumbledore said with a warm smile. I would have liked to clap, but this is the best I can manage at the moment. Headmaster Daphne stood and dusted off her robes. I thought you were still in the infirmary. I've had quite enough of Madame Pomfrey's supervision, Dumbledore replied. I was released yesterday. It's good to walk these halls again. His right sleeve hung empty, the arm lost during the battle. So, that arm is not coming back, huh? Luna pointed at where the headmaster's right arm used to be. Now there was only an empty sleeve hanging down. Luna, Lyra hissed in horror. Have some tact. The bluntness hung in the air for a moment, but Dumbledore only chuckled softly. He was used to Luna's peculiarities. I'm afraid not. The wound was caused by a very dangerous spell that I used in a time of need. His expression became serious as he looked at them. Let this be served as a cautionary tale. Magic should not be taken lightly. Powerful spells can have equally powerful consequences. The group nodded solemnly. What Dumbledore didn't share was that his arm could, in theory, be regenerated. However, the process would be excruciating and lengthy, something he had no interest in enduring at his age. He intended to retire once the school stabilized, confident that Professor McGonagall was ready to take over. Headmaster. Dumbledore's thoughts were interrupted by Daphne. Yes, Miss Greengrass. I didn't mean to overstep, she said, motioning to the stairs. Was it okay for me to... Dumbledore raised a hand, his expression kind. Perfectly fine. In fact, I came here to do the same thing, though I'm still getting used to performing magic with my left hand, so it's likely a good thing that you did it in my stead. Oh, okay. Relief washed over Daphne's face. Dumbledore turned to the gathered students. Well, what are you waiting for? You have new stairs now. Off to class. Ugh, bummer, Ron groaned as the students began making their way up the steps. Headmaster, Daphne called again as the headmaster was about to leave. He paused, his eyes twinkling. Yes, tomorrow is Saturday, so... Daphne hesitated. You want permission to visit him? Dumbledore finished for her. She nodded. Dumbledore smiled knowingly. I suppose we can make an exception, given your contributions to the school's safety. Do you need access to the Flow network? Moody has assured me it's secure again. No need, Daphne said. Ah, right, you already know how to operate. Just be discreet about it. You don't have a license yet. Thank you, sir, Daphne said gratefully. What the headmaster didn't know yet was that Daphne could have apparated away from the castle, even if the wards were functioning at full force. In the afternoon, Ginny and Lyra made their way into the dungeons for their last class of the day. Not looking forward to this one, Lyra grumbled, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Ginny gave her a side eye. I still don't understand your dislike for potions. Professor Snape never treats you badly and you're actually decent at brewing. Lyra shrugged with a dramatic sigh. It's just boring. All you do is stare at a cauldron. I'd rather be in Dida where I can actually throw spells around. She waved her hands as if casting imaginary hexes. Ginny rolled her eyes. After all the chaos they'd experienced in the past few years, she couldn't believe Lara wanted more excitement. You're not planning on becoming an Auror like your dad, are you? She asked, curious about her friend's career aspirations. Lyra tilted her head, considering. Maybe I am. That sounds like an exciting job. You know. Ginny gave a knowing smirk. Then you might want to pay attention in potions. You need a nanny duty in it to qualify for that position. Lyra frowned, muttering something under her breath. Changing the subject, Ginny asked. Say, when do you think your brother's coming back? I have no idea, Lyra admitted, her tone softening. He didn't look great when I last saw him. Honestly, he might not come back this year. She glanced at the ground, her voice quieter now. Maybe I should send Mum a letter, ask how things are going. Their conversation ended as they entered the classroom and froze. I don't think you need a letter. Ginny stared at the person sitting at the teacher's desk. Mum, Lyra nearly shouted, staring at the person seated on the other side of the classroom. Lily Potter looked up with a bright smile. Hey, sweetie, come sit at the front. I want to keep an eye on you. She lifted a finger, her expression growing serious. And remember, while we're at school, it's Professor Potter. Excuse me, but where is Professor Snape? A Slytherin student asked hesitantly. Lily waited until all the students had settled into their seats before addressing the class. All right, are we all here? Good. Now to answer your question from earlier, Professor Snape has officially retired. A wave of whispers and murmurs erupted through the room. Enough chatter, Lily said firmly, her voice cutting through the noise. I will be your potions professor for the remainder of the year or until the headmaster finds someone more permanent. A Gryffindor student raised their hand. Excuse me, Professor Potter, but why did he leave? Shh, who cares? A boy next to him tried to shut him up. Lily's expression softened slightly. Well, he decided it was time to step away from teaching and spend some time traveling the world with his new companion. New companion? You don't mean Professor Snape got a girlfriend? The class erupted in murmurs coming mostly from the Gryffindor side. The Slytherins were mostly in disbelief. That doesn't sound like Professor Snape at all, a skeptical Slytherin student muttered. Yeah, he wouldn't leave without saying anything, another student added. Lily merely shrugged. You're welcome to ask someone else if you don't believe me. Now let's get to work. Ministry of Magic. This is too sudden, Kingsley Shacklebolt muttered while pacing around the room. James Potter leaned against a desk with his arms crossed. Of course it's sudden, but the nation needs proper leadership and they chose you. Kingsley shook his head. The ICW chose me, not the citizens of magical Britain. James pushed off the desk and placed a reassuring hand on his friend's shoulder. There wasn't time for an election, and after everything I'm sure people will understand. Besides, you're one of the heroes of Hogsmeade. They would have voted for you in a heartbeat if given the chance. Kingsley's expression darkened. Please don't call me that. He sighed heavily. Dumbledore did most of the work, and he paid the highest price. James nodded solemnly. I know Dumbledore well enough to say he'd never take this position, but ICW likely thought the same. Kingsley's pacing slowed. The chaos left in Voldemort's wake had all but dismantled the ministry. Many officials had fled, been detained, or, worse, the ICW's intervention had been swift, ensuring a complete purge of Voldemort's influence from the government. A fresh start was imperative afterward, and a new government had to be formed, starting with a new Minister of Magic. Look, James continued, this country needs a good, honest leader for a change. The people deserve it. Don't you think so? Kingsley stopped pacing and sat heavily in a chair, his face lined with weariness. After a long pause, he finally said, Very well, I'll accept the position of Minister for Magic. James started to speak, but Kingsley cut him off, pointing a finger at him. But, Kingsley said firmly, I want you by my side. James blinked in surprise. You know I'm married, right? Kingsley raised an eyebrow. Very funny. But that's not what I meant. With Lady Bones gone, we need a new head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. I can't think of anyone better than you for the job. Will you take it? James hesitated, the weight of the offer settling on him. After a moment he smiled faintly. How could I say no to that? March 6th, someone appeared at the front of the Potter mansion with a loud cracking noise. She could have appeared inside the house, but it just didn't seem polite, so she waited at the door. Her presence must have already been noted. It took only a few seconds before the door opened, and she was greeted by a bubbly house elf. Welcome, Miss Daphne. Thanks, Mipsy. How are things going here? Well, Miss Holly is getting a bit restless now that both Mistress and Master Potter are working out of the house. The elf looked a bit troubled while saying that. Yes, I can imagine that, Daphne responded. The youngest Potter child was a ball of energy. Isn't Victoria keeping her company? The elf shook her head. Miss Victoria's also outside. She mentioned having some business at the ministry. I see. Daphne knew a bit more about that topic. She recalled having heard that Victoria was starting the legal process to reclaim the title of Lady Black. Proving her claim to that ancient wizarding house was not going to be easy, especially now that the magical government was being reconstructed from scratch, not to mention that she came from an alternative world. Even with the help of James Potter, it would take her a while, perhaps years. But it wasn't like she had much else to do at the moment. Victoria had already decided not to return to Hogwarts and would instead finish her education studying on her own. She told Daphne that it would feel too strange to attend school again and be surrounded by alternate versions of her friends, who knew nothing of her. That comment reminded Daphne of how Harry must have felt when he began attending school for the second time. And how is he? Daphne finally asked what she really wanted to know. Mepsy sighed. Still hasn't left his room, spends most of the time lying in bed, but he looks a bit better. Daphne nodded. This did not come as a surprise. I would like to see him. Of course. The house elf escorted her to Harry's room. Once they arrived, Mepsy turned to her. I will leave you alone. Would you like me to prepare something? Some tea would be nice, Daphne told the elf, who then went away. She stood there for a moment, looking at the door handle. Once she gathered the will to continue, she gave the door a soft knock. Come in, Daphne. Harry's voice was clearly heard. Looks like you haven't lost all your abilities, she said as she walked inside. As Mipsy had said, Harry was resting on his bed with a book on his lap. He raised an eyebrow at her comment. And who said that I lost any of my abilities? Daphne ignored the question. Everyone had assumed that after seeing him like this, you look better. Daphne commented. It was an honest remark too. His hair had gone from pure white to a healthier silver tone, and his eyes no longer looked devoid of life. His irises had turned to a pale blue, but at least he looked more human now. 3. I have the appearance of an old man, Harry huffed. I was even compared to Dumbledore. Daphne chuckled at this. I can see why. Yes, he also found it amusing, Harry added. Daphne walked closer and sat on the bed. I'm surprised Holly isn't here begging for you to play with her. She was here earlier. We played Exploding Snap for a while, Harry told her. At the mention of that game, Daphne gave the room a quick scan and noticed the burned curtains. I see. Dobby is keeping her company now, he then said. That sounds even more dangerous than playing that game with you, Daphne said. Her eyes then went to an object resting on Harry's desk. It was a glass vial with some metallic shards inside, as well as a few pieces of a green crystal. Is that? Harry followed her gaze to know what she was referring to. That's what's left of my staff, yes. I never knew goblin steel could shatter like that. It's supposed to be nearly indestructible. I doubt anyone had ever channeled so much magic through that material before to test that theory. Nothing is indestructible in the end, Harry suggested. I suppose not, but who collected them? Daphne was sure that Harry had not set foot on Hogwarts after the battle, much less to peruse over the remains of the battle. Professor Dumbledore brought me that. But the interesting part is that it was Snape who made the effort to find all those pieces and put them inside a vial. Professor Snape did. Daphne found that truly surprising. The man's dislike for all things Potter was not exactly a secret. The only ones somewhat immune to that were his mother, to some extent his sister Lyra. I suppose it was his way to say thanks without actually having to say the words to me. I doubt he is capable of such a feat, to be honest. Daphne had to agree on that one. I'm sure he's much happier now that he doesn't have the threat of the Dark Lord hanging over him. She had a brief taste of that, but Snape had been like that for almost 2 decades. From what I've heard, he disappeared along with Lady Malfoy after emptying his vault, so I bet he's more than happy right now, Harry said with a tinge of amusement in his voice. 5. Well, Daphne made a complicated expression. She'd rather not imagine her old potions professor and Draco's mother together. I hope he has some peace. He's earned it. After a moment of silence, she looked at Harry again. "And what about you? How are you feeling?" Harry shrugged. "I'm fine." He was just tired of people asking that question. "Yes, you look fantastic," Daphne said with a deadpan expression. "Are you planning on coming back to school? Everyone is asking about you." "I have no need to return there. My mission is complete," Harry said calmly. Daphne frowned. Her body tensed up at the mention of his mission. "But that's not what you wanted to ask me, is it?" Harry said. When Daphne finally asked with a serious face. Harry smiled softly. "I don't have a specific date, but it must be before the last tournament task." Daphne gasped. "That's only 3 months from now. Why so soon?" Daphne exclaimed. "I thought that maybe," she hoped it was still a few years away at least. "I cannot risk another convergence occurring. The next one could be the last." Harry had already explained the basics of it so she would understand how dangerous it was to wait any longer. "But the Dark Lord is no longer here. How could another one occur?" she asked. "But I am here," he told her. "I am the main cause of all this. Now that the world is free from Voldemort's threat, I could ruin everything just because I wanted to stay a bit longer. I can't do that." Daphne could tell how determined he was by a simple glance at his eyes. Nothing she said was going to change his mind. "You knew this day was going to come," Harry reminded her of the conversation they already had. "I know." Daphne had to push her occlumency to keep her emotions under control. "Have you told your family?" Harry shook his head. "I was planning on telling them the day before or so. If I tell them now, they'll waste all their time trying to find an alternative way to solve this thing. Maybe that—" "No," Harry interrupted her immediately, with a firm tone. "I already looked into it, and so did Dumbledore and Professor Silverbell. There is no way the 3 of us could have missed something that my family could figure out in this short amount of time." Daphne stood up with a flushed face. "So that's it then," she yelled. "You're going to die just like that? After everything we went through?" Her occlumency shields were unable to contain the rush of emotions she was feeling right now. "Daphne, calm down." Harry spoke in a soothing tone. "This is the only way for everyone to have a future. Is a small sacrifice for the greater go. Don't give me that. I don't want to hear it." She rushed out of his room. Even if he wanted to, Harry was unable to follow her. His magic had recovered from the exhaustion, but his muscles and bones had been severely damaged under all the pressure he put them through. Even with the medicine he had been given, it would take him another week before he could walk. He saw Daphne slam the door on her way out and could hear her run through the corridor and away from his room. "This is also why I don't want to tell them." Harry sighed. He would really like to not have this conversation again with his parents. In the 4 years he had lived in this world, he had grown attached to this version of his family. After all, it was the only version he knew. But even when he learned that he could not remain here forever, he still felt happy to have met them. Now that his mission was over, he had no more qualms about leaving this world. "Okay, maybe I do have just one." He heard a cracking noise and felt Daphne's magical signature disappear. "Sorry, Daphne." The door opened, and a panicked Darby came inside, soon followed by Mipsy and Holly. "Master Potter Harry, sir, is in danger," Dobby exclaimed while looking around for threats. "Danger?" Holly pulled out her toy wand and waved it around. "Master Harry, are you okay?" Mitzi asked. "We heard a loud commotion. I can't wait to get out of this bed," Harry thought. He had hoped for some peace at home, but that obviously was not happening. "Knock, knock." "Come in," Lily Potter said when she heard someone knock on the door of her office. It had only been a few days since she began teaching potions, but she had already received a large number of visits. Apparently a lot of students had doubts about the subject but hadn't dared to ask Professor Snape, so their questions had been accumulating. "Daphne?" She was surprised to see who was visiting her this time. The blonde girl was one of the best potion students in the entire school, so it was unlikely she had any doubts about the homework she had given. "Sorry to bother you, but we need to talk about something important." Daphne's expression was more serious than usual. She had been thinking about this the entire weekend, but now she had finally made a decision, and there was no time to waste. Lily smiled. "You never bother me," And you're also my first visit from Slytherin. I have the feeling the rest of the house is avoiding me. Daphne stared at her for a moment. That's because they are. Why, though? Is it because I'm a Gryffindor? Lily asked. Daphne stopped before her desk. It's because you're Harry's mother. Are they afraid of him? Lily asked. Of course. To be fair, most seniors were already somewhat afraid of him, even before what happened that day, but the Slytherins have more reason for that. Most of their families had ties with the Dark Lord. The war may be over, but I'm sure that most of them were forced to help that monster. Harry would never hurt them without reason. Lily frowned. She didn't like people seeing her son as if he were a dangerous wild beast who would attack for no reason. I know that as well as you, but most don't really understand Harry that well. He is not exactly very open about himself. They just know what he can do with his magic, and that scares them, Daphne explained. Forget it, Daphne told her. You cannot change the way they think. Eventually they'll realize. Right. Lily stared at her for a moment. You know, Daphne, you're very mature for your age. When I talk with you, I sometimes forget how young you are. Thank you. She wasn't sure if Lily meant it as a compliment or if she was just saying she was strange. Oh, but you came here because you needed to talk about something, right? You said it was important. Please sit down and tell me. Daphne nodded and sat in front of Lily. There is something I need. Sure, what is it? If there's anything I can do for you, I'll be happy to help, Lily responded with a warm smile. A while ago I visited your family library. You were reading an ancient book that contained some rituals. Ah, I remember that one. We found it inside the family vault, Lily said. Wait, you're not planning on performing a ritual, right? Those are very dangerous. Trust me, I know, Daphne said. But there's one in particular that I need from there. It's called the Eternal Bond Ritual. Eternal Bond? Lily racked her brain, trying to recall the contents of that ritual. That was a soul-binding ritual of sorts. Yes, I want to use it. Lily's face grew serious. I'm assuming you intend to use it with Harry. A ritual like that was only meant to be used by older couples, where one of them might die at any moment but they wanted their souls to remain together until the end. In a way it was similar to how Voldemort had tied his soul to the mortal realm, but this ritual required something the Dark Lord could never possess. Love. Lily knew that her son and Daphne had grown very close, but Harry and Daphne were still so young, and neither of them was in imminent danger of dying. If you're worried about Harry's condition, I assure you, it's not his condition that worries me. Daphne interrupted her, already knowing what Lily was thinking. Then what is it? What could you possibly need a ritual like that for? Unless you can give me a valid reason, I cannot lend you that book. Lily's tone was firm. Daphne leaned back in her chair. She had already reckoned that the conversation would end up here and had prepared herself for it. I hope you don't have any appointments because this is going to take a while to explain. An Order of Merlin? Harry asked. First class, James stated with a wide grin. It's the highest honor that the Wizengamot can award, Lily added. Not that I expect anything less after what you did, she said with a happy tone. Harry furrowed his silver eyebrows. He didn't like public appearances. His father, James, noticed his look and immediately knew what he was thinking. Come on, the citizens of magical Britain want to see their hero getting recognized. Even the newspapers are pushing for it. Fine. Harry eventually relented to his father's wish. It had been a week since Daphne's visit, and he was finally recovered enough to walk around, although he still needed the assistance of a cane to do so. Both his parents had come home to celebrate. Holly and Victoria were also at home, but Lyra couldn't return until the end of the year, so she had to stay at school. He hadn't heard from Daphne all week, but after thinking about it, Harry considered this a good thing. Staying in touch would only make things more difficult when he had to leave. He noticed his mother giving him some strange looks, but before he could ask what they were about, his father jumped at him with the whole award ceremony idea. Great, James exclaimed. The award ceremony will take place in 2 weeks at Hogwarts. Wait, why at Hogwarts? The Wizengamot Council is the one giving the award, Harry said. They thought it would be appropriate since you're still a student and Dumbledore is the headmaster. James then realized something. Oh, I guess I forgot to mention, but Dumbledore is also getting an award. It would make more sense if you were actually attending classes, Lily told Harry. Speaking of, when do you think you'll be recovered enough to return? You're missing my wonderful lessons. Yeah, you should take advantage while you can. Who knows what kind of old fogey we'll be teaching next year, James added. Feeling the stares of his parents, Harry knew he had to say something. But he couldn't just tell them there was no point in going back since he didn't plan to live much longer. I guess after the awards I'll stay, Harry finally responded. Enduring a few weeks of classes was preferable to the alternative. That's wonderful, Lily said with a smile. That reminds me, she turned to look at Victoria. Victoria scowled. I've already talked about this. I have no intention of going back there. I'll finish my education independently and take the test when I'm of age. Lily was clearly unhappy with that answer, but they had already discussed it, and there was no changing Victoria's mind. What about me? I want to go to school. Holly pouted. I'm bored here. Lily gave her youngest daughter a patient smile. My love, you'll go to Hogwarts when it's time. You still have 2 more years to wait. But I want to learn magic, she said. Can Harry teach me? You don't even have a wand yet, James interjected. You need to be a bit patient. Holly looked between Harry and her mother. Can Harry teach me in 2 years then? Lily froze for a moment. Her eyes darted to Harry and quickly moved away. I mean, sure, he can teach you then. Still 2 years, Holly sighed. You know, I could give Holly a few lessons in runes, or even some basic potions. Those aren't dangerous, and don't require a wand, Victoria suggested. You know, that's not a bad idea, James agreed. Are you sure? Lily asked. I know you're busy with the inheritance process. I can make some time for Holly, Victoria said, patting the little girl's head. Yes, Holly exclaimed with joy. The next 2 weeks passed in a flash. Harry spent his time in his study, where he finally finished writing the new family grimoire. He added a few extra things, like the formula for creating the magicite alloy he used for his jewelry. This was mostly for Victoria, as she was the most qualified to put it to good use. But who knows what the future of his family might look like. Perhaps another rune master would appear generations from now and use it as well. Before leaving, he set the broken pieces of his jewelry in a drawer at his desk. He could have asked Victoria to help him make new ones, but he had no use for them anymore. The day of his return arrived, so after saying his goodbyes, he walked out to the garden and apparated away. He chose to arrive at the giant doors of the Great Hall. He noted they were already closed, meaning that the ceremony had started. Oops, I'm a bit late, he muttered. Someone was speaking loudly, announcing Dumbledore's award. Harry placed a hand on one of the giant doors and pushed it open with little effort. Now that his body had completely recovered, such a feat was easy. The speaker stopped mid-speech, and everyone in the hall turned to see who had opened the doors. Finally, our other guest of honor has arrived. Harry recognized the speaker. It was none other than Kingsley Shacklebolt, former Auror member of the Order of the Phoenix and now the new Minister of Magic. The hall erupted in murmurs as people recognized him. His month-long absence had only fueled the rumors about him, and at this point he was the most talked-about topic in the school. The minister had to make an effort to calm the audience. Please, Mr. Potter, why don't you come this way? Shacklebolt gestured toward an empty chair next to Dumbledore. Now we can properly commence this ceremony, he declared, as Harry was passing by the Gryffindor table. His sister Lyra stopped him. Harry, by Merlin, you look normal again, she exclaimed. Harry had no doubt she was referring to his hair and eyes, which had now returned to their usual colors. I assure you that Merlin had nothing to do with that. Thanks, he responded. So you're completely recovered now? Lyra asked. Harry noticed the serious concern in her eyes, and tried to offer a reassuring smile. Yes, I feel great. Of course his current appearance was nothing more than a magical alteration. There was no way to regain what had been lost, but it was very simple for him to change a few of his physical features. You look very elegant too, Ginny added while eyeing his robes. Harry nodded. Thank you, Ginny. He wasn't a fan of these types of ceremonies, but he had at least put in the effort to look presentable. After being called by the minister once more, he had no choice but to continue moving toward the podium. He heard a loud rumble of thunder and glanced upward. The enchanted ceiling was working once more. As he had predicted, most of Hogwarts' functions had returned. Still, he knew it would take several decades for the massive Arkstone to fully recover the magic he had taken. The school only used a small fraction of its power on a daily basis, but Harry had pushed the magical castle to its limits. Sorry, he apologized again, uncertain if the castle could truly sense his remorse, but he still felt that what he did was necessary. Greetings, Harry. Come sit by my side. Dumbledore greeted him and gestured to the chair next to him. Hello, Professor. After sitting down, Harry briefly inquired about Dumbledore's injuries. I feel completely recovered and happy to be back doing some work, and I'm elated to see that you are much better as well, Dumbledore replied. Today we are gathered here to honor two incredible wizards. Minister Shacklebolt's voice resounded across the Great Hall, followed by a round of applause. Harry took the opportunity to look around. The professors were seated in their usual places, but an extra table had been added for the ministry guests. Other than his parents, there were familiar faces such as Alistair Moody, who looked distinctly uncomfortable and out of place in elegant robes. Remus sat next to James, and several other members of the Order of the Phoenix were present. Molly and Arthur Weasley waved at Harry. Several members of the Wizengamot were also in attendance, as they had voted to grant the awards. Harry wasn't sure of the council's current size, as many had likely died during the battle. Their family members might have filled the vacant seats, though they were probably reluctant to attend a ceremony honoring the person who had killed their former patriarchs. He did spot the Lord and Lady of the Greengrass family, who offered him a polite greeting. For his bravery in the face of adversity and his sacrifice to protect the village of Hogsmeade, the minister signaled his assistant to present a medal to Dumbledore. I wish to present Albus Percival Wulfric, Brian Dumbledore with the Order of Merlin First Class. The audience clapped and cheered as the headmaster accepted the award. And now, the minister glanced at Harry, to the wizard who accomplished the impossible, the one who defeated the terrorist known as Tom Riddle, or by his self-styled name, Lord Voldemort. The minister's bold statement provoked mixed reactions. Referring to the Dark Lord by both his true name and alias was startling to many. This was a deliberate choice by Shacklebolt to help remove the almost godlike status that people had given Voldemort in their minds. It was a reminder that at the end of the day the Dark Lord was just a mortal being like everyone else, no matter how much he liked to say the opposite. Some were offended by the minister's words, as they saw them as disrespectful, but most were still afraid of Voldemort's name. Despite the large number of witnesses, few truly understood the finality of what Harry had done. Many still believed Voldemort might return someday with a new army of undead. It would take a long time for the fear of that monster to fade from people's minds. Minister Shacklebolt continued his speech, listing Harry's accomplishments in saving the school, its occupants, and also destroying the army of the dead Voldemort had summoned. I wish there was a higher honor I could bestow upon you, Mr. Potter, because I fear this one is insufficient for your deeds. The minister signaled his assistant to present the medal. But please, accept this Order of Merlin First Class for now, Shacklebolt said. Harry allowed the medal to be placed around his neck, and nodded in acknowledgement. The audience erupted in cheers. Yeah, Harry, Lavender yelled. That's my brother, Lyra screamed. The ceremony concluded with a lengthy speech from the new minister about the future of magical Britain and what lay ahead. Once it ended, dinner was served by the house elves, and everyone began to eat. Harry was seated at the teacher's table next to the headmaster for the occasion. Several professors mentioned how they looked forward to having him back in class. But Harry was only half listening. His attention was elsewhere. His eyes moved to the Slytherin table. Despite the absence of many students, the table was filled with guest students from Durmstrang and parents attending the ceremony. But among the crowd he couldn't find the one he was searching for. Daphne was nowhere to be seen. Once things calmed down and dinner was nearly over, Harry took the first chance he got to excuse himself from the hall. After leaving the busy room, he decided to take a walk through the empty corridors of the castle to clear his mind a bit. As he wandered, he couldn't help but think about Daphne. They hadn't talked again since the day she stormed out of his house. At first he had been somewhat relieved that she decided to distance herself from him before he went away. But this time without her had also allowed him to acknowledge how much he had been depending on her company as of late. Without realizing it, that girl had become his closest friend and confidant. She was the only one he trusted with many of his deepest secrets, and the only one he relied on to protect Hogwarts during his absence. He didn't count the Vampire Lord because she was a slave to the contract they made, so no trust was necessary there. Harry stopped for a moment and looked out of the window. Tonight was a moonless night, so there wasn't much to see out there. Still, he lingered a bit longer. Daphne's absence tonight had forced him to acknowledge that he missed her company. I want to see her, but that would be selfish. If she wanted to distance herself from him, that was for the best. There you are. A very familiar voice came from his side. Huh? Harry looked in surprise at the figure of the girl he had just been thinking about. Daphne was wearing her school uniform. While staring at him, she was also breathing with difficulty, like she had been running for a while. The elves told me you left the hall, but they didn't say where you went after that. It took me a while to find you. You were looking for me. I mean, if you wanted to see me, you could have attended the event, Harry responded, still feeling a bit confused. I hate those events, Daphne scoffed. Besides, I wanted to speak with you in private, not in the middle of the Great Hall, surrounded by all those people. I see. He had no idea what she wanted to talk about, and could only hope she wasn't about to start yelling at him again. After recovering her breath, Daphne took a moment to observe him. You look much better now. Did you use transfiguration to change the color of your hair and eyes? I did. Harry noted that she immediately realized he had used magic to restore his usual look rather than recovering naturally. What did you want to talk about? Not here. Daphne moved closer and grabbed his hand before guiding him away. Let's go somewhere more private. Harry didn't try to resist her pull and simply let her lead him. Oh, here. After walking for several more minutes, Harry recognized the corridor they were in. Between the 3rd and the 6th floors was where one would usually find the trophy room. From there, if one turned to the right, there was a long corridor with several doors along it. The students knew that these doors were always locked, and many had theories about their contents. The safe room, we haven't been here in years, Harry pointed out. This was the room he had opened one day while escaping from Filch and his cat. He and Daphne had used it afterward for their secret meetings since, other than the professors, Harry was the only one who could open the door, or at least, that's how it used to be. Daphne placed her hand on the handle and gave it a twist. The door immediately unlocked and opened. Let's go, she urged him inside. Since the day she accompanied him to the castle foundations to learn more about the Golems, Daphne seemed to have formed a bond with them and with the rest of the castle. In a way, Hogwarts was like a gigantic magical artifact that would only respond to those who had a bond with it. And somehow she had formed one. Harry never thought much about it since he had a lot on his mind at the time, preparing for Voldemort's arrival and all that. But it was truly curious. He knew why he had a bond with the castle, but Daphne remained a mystery. She closed the door and looked around. This should be private enough. Harry heard Daphne groan and noticed she was staring at a corner of the room. What is it? I don't know, I suddenly felt my stomach turn. It took him a moment to understand the reason. Despite being destroyed during his fight with that hired assassin in his first year, the room was currently in pristine condition, and the elves had kept it completely clean. Nothing was broken and there were no foul smells. But Harry then recalled the reason he stopped using this room. His eyes went to the fireplace. That was where he had once hidden the rotting body of the man who had pretended to be a professor to kill Neville. Daphne had been using the secret exit behind the fireplace, and found it after one of their meetings. Right. I did obliviate her that day. Harry concluded that despite her memories of the event being gone, the feeling of disgust must have remained on a subconscious level. We could go somewhere else, Harry suggested. Daphne shook her head, trying to shake off the unpleasant sensation. No, I'm okay. And this is too important. Something important, to be honest. I thought you were still mad at me, Harry said. She turned to look at him. I'm still kind of mad, but that's not what I wanted to ask you now. I see. Well, I'm listening, Harry told her. Daphne got closer to him and stared into his eyes with a serious expression. Harry James Potter, will you marry me? Harry blinked a few times. Huh.